right. Yo, what it do, what it do. It's your boy Yellow the Poet here, and today we have Mr. Zane Landin. I am definitely happy to have this gentleman here, communication specialist, authentic storyteller, culturally competent leader, and so many other hats. Oh my goodness, you'll be surprised. Mr. Zane, thank you so much, and we definitely welcome you here at YTP Entertainment. It's a blessing to have you, and I am looking forward to you sharing your story and information with the audience.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you having me on and allowing me to share my story.
Yes, indeed. Oh my goodness. One of the things that I'm most curious about, this was something we kind of touched bases on, was how did you become an advocate for the gay people? I'm curious about how that all started.
Well, I mean, someone that has the lived experience of being queer myself,
Okay.
not that necessarily people have to be advocates if they're queer, because I don't think that they do. I know
Mhm.
there's the pressure that, if you carry certain identities, that you have to be an advocate for them. You already have sometimes the burden of having to have that identity. I don't think you need to be an advocate.
Right.
I think that's totally up to you. That's your agency. But for me, and I am more of a mental health disability advocate. That's a lot where my work is. But where I would say where I'm a queer advocate is just sharing my story and just, making people aware that, people who are queer or whatever queer identities that they have, that they're just regular people trying to live their lives just like everyone else. And of course, through that, they deserve respect and understanding. And how do I say this? It's like they deserve respect, but like you don't have to understand though. You don't. For me, you can believe what you want as long as you don't hurt yourself or other people. It's like
Hmm.
if you really don't believe in a lifestyle or you don't believe in my sexuality, that's fine. Just don't tell me. You don't need to tell me. Like I don't really want to be around that negative energy. And I've had people say that they don't agree with it, but at least they were still very respectful that I could still be friends with them or have a conversation with them.
Exactly.
So I think that's where the line you draw is. It's like you may not agree with what people do, you may not agree with the choices I make, but as long as you still respect me as a human first, and as we're moving in this world where even like people first language, like people of color, people who are queer, people with disabilities, it's like the fundamental idea is that you treat them as a person first, and
Yes.
you don't treat them based on their identity, because I think that's where you get a lot of discrimination, of course, because you're treating them like their identity, like, hey, this is your identity, I need to treat you differently, even if you think that you're being conscious of it or you have good intentions. I think you're still actively trying to treat someone differently and you're assuming things about them.
Hmm.
Or like someone says, oh, because I'm Hispanic, they see I'm Hispanic, they know I'm Hispanic, and they start treating me differently, or they start speaking Spanish to me more. It's like you don't have to do that, and I don't even know Spanish. And so you don't have to ask the person, maybe what they prefer. Don't assume, or you don't treat me a certain way just because you assume things about my identity. Just ask me or learn about it if you want. You know what I mean? I hope that answers your question.
Oh, definitely. It does. It does. And me coming from a family, I have queer people in my family. And one of the things that I want to ask before I go on is it more acceptable to call the people queer or gay? Which one is either one of them disrespectful? Because that's what I don't want to be.
I would say, of course, it's personal preference, because I know I'm friends with a lot of older queer people that
Mhm.
don't necessarily appreciate the term queer, and they have every single right not to like it.
Okay.
Because even though the queer community has decided to take back the word that's been used against them, a lot of folks like me, it's not taken back because I've never experienced it that way. Do you know what I mean? So like even the queer community collectively is trying to take the word back, and in a way they are. For folks like me, it's like I don't really recognize how harmful that word has been for me because I've never been called that. So for someone who's older that has actually been called that,
Hmm.
I think we need to be understanding of those people that don't want to use the word. So my suggestion is like I usually I say queer because it's easier. I wouldn't say gay because you don't know if they're gay. They could be bisexual, or whatever other sexuality there is that they identify with. And so I would just say like I would say queer. I think that's fine, especially if you're using it in a well-mannered way, like, oh, they're part of the queer community. You're obviously not using it, with any animosity or a way to insult anyone. Or if you want, you could also say part of the LGBTQ community. I know some people, it's like all the letters. So it's like, you just want to say queer. That's why I say queer, because like, I don't know if I have to say all those letters. I'll just say queer because it's just so much easier and it's just feels more encompassing.
I understand. No, but the point that I was trying to get to is this. I just feel like we need to pretty much eliminate all the titles when we're in a group setting or when we're having a conversation with someone. And the only title that I see when I'm talking to anyone, I don't care who they are, I don't care what race, color, creed, or anything that a person is. The
Yeah.
only title that I see is human being. That's
Yeah.
the title that I see. And I feel like if enough of us would accept that and use that, then that would be, excuse me, that would be the more proper outlet for all of us to go through. And let's just treat each other accordingly, treat each other like human beings, because that's what we are. We're human beings before we accept any other portion of our lives. We're
Yeah.
human beings before anything else ever happens. We're human beings. At birth, we're human beings. So,
Yeah.
irregardless of what we do, what decisions we make, what life changes we make, irregardless of what they are, identify me and I identify you as a human being, and let's move forward from there, because that way I feel like it eliminates all the judgments and being judgmental and not
Mhm.
giving a person an opportunity to see if this person has a type of character, demeanor, or
Yeah.
attitude, or whatever it is that you can say, hey,
Uh,
this is somebody I can actually vibe with. This is somebody I can actually communicate with. Because at the end of the day, every single person has some sort of problem, some sort of issue. Every single person has some good things that they could talk about or good things that's ever happened to them. So I don't see why there's so much to differentiate people or to alienate people. I don't see any reason or purpose behind that. It's pointless.
I I agree. And I do find that like a beautiful way to treat people, but I think I think one of the problems is that there are people that push the narrative that you do need to treat people differently. And again, they're coming from good intentions, unfortunately. What I mean is, like, even in some spaces I've been in, they say, like, when people say, I don't see color, I treat everyone the same. That now is problematic, which I disagree with.
Mhm.
I don't like that that's problematic, because it's like, I don't know, like, so you expect me to treat you differently because of your race, and it's not your race. It's what I think of your race, right? It's, and like, it's someone like, I'm gonna treat you differently because you're queer. I'm gonna be understanding of your queer. Like, what do you need to be understanding of? What do
Right.
you need, like, what do you need to be under, like, are you gonna assume I've gone through like a hate crime or something? Like, don't assume anything. You just treat me as a person first. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with being colorblind, as long as you still acknowledge the issues they have. So if someone, says, I'm going to treat everyone the same, but someone does come forward that they've gone through like severe racism, it's like, well, I'm going to recognize that, and I'm going to like understand, and I'm still going to treat you right. And I'm still going to be like understanding of the things that you've gone through. So you can treat everyone the same and see everyone as equal, but you can still also acknowledge that everyone has a past, a present, and a future, and they have different identities that make them up. Because I've heard that, and I've also heard like some people that like say identities are not important, and it's all about your character and how a good person you are. I agree, but also like, no, our identities actually do very much matter,
Mhm.
because if I wasn't queer or Hispanic, I wouldn't be the person I am today at all.
Mhm.
Um, I would hopefully still be a good person, but I wouldn't be who I am. I'd be a completely different person. That is how impactful each identity is. Even if I was born a different race, I'd be a very different person, very different. And so, like, we have to acknowledge how important everything we go through is, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I feel like whatever our past experiences are, as well as our genetic makeups and our decision, does create an identity for a person. My my thing is not to put a label on a person
Yeah.
without one knowing who that person is. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So we can have all the titles in the world that people recognize you as such, but title and identity is not the same thing, because when you look at title, that's something that's put on you. But when you look at
Yeah.
identity, that's something that you were born and bred with. This is how I identify. This is who I am. This is what I am and what I will be, regardless of what anybody else thinks of it. But when you put a title on it, now you're covering up who I really am or who this person really is.
Yeah.
And we don't want to put titles and labels on people. That's something you put on products. I'm a human being. I'm not a product. I'm a product of my environment. I'm a product of my culture, but I'm not a product that you
Right.
just go and change it whenever you feel like it.
No, I agree with that. And I was talking to someone about that recently because I was on a Gen Z podcast that was in person, and we talked about labels. And I even say I don't like the term label or title because that's not what it is. And so I think there's some things that are labels like, oh, like I label myself as this kind of person, or this is my lifestyle, or I live in this kind of environment. But it's kind of like my race or my sexuality, those aren't labels. How is that a label? Like I cannot take it off. And I know some people say it's all about how you identify. I kind of disagree. I mean, I could literally say I don't identify as Hispanic. Unfortunately, no, fortunately, I am Hispanic. So it's
Exactly.
kind of like I can't say, well, I say unfortunate because it's like in that case, if I don't want to identify, it's unfortunate. But
No,
like
I,
fortunately, I am Hispanic. It's like that I cannot change. So that's not a label. That's literally an identity that I can choose to embrace or not. But unfortunately, you can't just say identify as that. It's like some things you 100% identify with, but you can choose to not align yourself and just say like you don't want to bring it up, you don't talk about it, but it's still a part of you, you know?
that's true. That is so true. So another thing that I want to talk about is, and this is something that I grew up around, and
Mm.
that's the mental health.
Yeah.
I grew up with two uncles in my household, and they both um, are mental health patients, and they both had two different issues. And as a
Hmm.
little boy, I struggled with understanding them and the way that they did things and how they done things. But as I grew older, my grandmother, because that's what I was raised by, my grandmother helped me to understand a lot more about what they were doing, how they did things, and why they did certain things. Now,
Yeah.
she may not have had a in-depth
Right.
explanation for why they did things, but she understood them a lot more because I mean they were her children and they were in the household with her predominantly all day, every day, unless maybe she had to go to work or something. But
Hmm.
she helped me out a lot, and it made me veer towards being able to understand a lot more about mental health, and I wanted to always be there and be helpful to anybody who I can identify that they have some sort of mental health issues. Because one of the things that I notice in our society is a lot of people are mean to people with mental health issues rather than trying to understand them or
Mm.
just be nice to them, because they usually, even if they know how to talk or know how to communicate, they usually don't say a whole lot, and they're usually not trying to be in your presence for very long.
Hmm.
Give them that moment to shine and just let it be
Hmm.
that. So, what are some pointers, some idea ways that we, as people who don't understand, can help to make situations lighter for people with mental health?
Yeah, my response is, and it's coming from someone that doesn't have any professional experience. Like I don't have any professional experience working in a mental health facility. I don't have a degree in psychology, but as a person again with the lived experience and an advocate, my thing is always just, have those good intentions and just ask questions and try to learn from them. Instead, and also like don't ever interrupt and try to help them if you don't really know how to help them. And so sometimes it's always about sometimes just asking the person. And I think that for some, they don't see the value in that, in asking that, but the person on the receiving end, it's very valuable because, sometimes they don't know how to articulate what they want or what they need, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard for them to say, like, well, especially for people that are like just are starting to understand a diagnosis or their mental health. It's like, I don't know how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling angry, but I don't know what can help with that. And I think just giving them that space to share that they're feeling that, maybe you can suggest something like, oh, do you want to do this? Maybe this will help. And if they say no, you just kind of have to leave it at that. And of course, because you don't want to pressure them into doing something they don't want to do, and that could make them feel worse. So there's a lot of things. I also think just doing research, like, if someone in your family was diagnosed with a certain mental health condition, do research on people that have had that condition. Do research on some of the science about things that they might do that might feel kind of taboo at first. But you're like, okay, I get the condition, I understand, but also don't use the condition against them and go and say like, oh, I know you have this condition, that's why you're doing this. Well, don't do that, because then I feel like sometimes certain conditions can be weaponized, where it's kind of like, hey, you're acting this way because you have this disorder. It's like, well, I think you should, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's them just acting normally, and that's just kind of how their reaction is. Because then when you do that, I think sometimes you can put them in this box that whatever they're feeling is not theirs, it's their mental health condition. And so if they're ever feeling a certain way and you just tell them, oh, it's the bipolar, it's the schizophrenia, it's the depression, it's like, if it is, so what? Like, what's the point in saying that? Maybe it's good to, I think sometimes it might be good to say, like, let's recognize the anger you have right now, because sometimes anger might be irrational, sometimes the depression might be irrational. Sometimes it's worth pointing that out, but I think sometimes it can be used in such a weaponizing way that that's where it can be damaging for someone. And so they have to be very careful with that. But to me, it's always like, just try to be understanding, ask questions, have empathy, like some of like the most basic human things that we can do. And don't think you have to know the answer. So I think sometimes people think like, I need to fix them, I need to know the answer. It's like, no, you don't. Because for one, they might see a mental health practitioner and like, that's not the job. They're not trying to fix you. And if you have that mindset of trying to fix someone, go see someone else if that's someone's intention, because it's not trying to fix you. It's like trying to help you live your best life with the mental health condition you do have. And so I do see that where some people say, I'm trying to fix you. It's like, no, don't do that, because that can that can further divide them, because they don't want to think that they're being fixed or that there's something functionally wrong with them, because there's not. They just are going to be living life differently based on that mental health condition. And so I'm trying to think if there's like any other tips, but that's just it. Like, just do your research, ask questions. Don't think that you have to have the answers, because also you shouldn't, it's not your job or your responsibility to fix them or help them. Like, you can only do so much, and that can be really taxing on your mental health too, right? And so like if you're trying to do as much as you can for someone, and that's great, you're being a great person, but sometimes you have to take a step back and take care of yourself, because if you're going to be supporting someone with mental health, you can't irreversibly be neglecting your own mental health, because you just shouldn't, and you shouldn't have the burden of taking care, unless you're a caregiver, I understand, but it's not sometimes the burden of you to have to take care of someone all the time when it's not, you don't need to do that, you know what I mean? And so I understand that it's hard for someone, especially if it's like their family member or a good friend, especially when, I will say this, and I don't know if people get this, but sometimes, someone with mental health conditions, sometimes not a lot, because even studies show that people with mental health conditions are victimized more than being perpetrators of violence,
Exactly.
but it's still possible. And so like if someone does have a mental health condition and they get violent or they say really horrible stuff, there has to be a point where sometimes you say, I'm taking a step back, I can't do this anymore. And
Exactly.
it's not that you're abandoning them, it's that you don't want to enable them anymore to be treating you to be like engaged in this toxic behavior. Because I know people that, like, their significant other or their friend has a mental health condition, and they've said some of the most horrible stuff, or it's gotten violent. I'm like, you have no obligation to be there then, because you cannot be enabling a toxic environment like that.
Exactly.
And you also, again, need to take care of yourself. It's not you abandoning them, it's you taking care of yourself. And you can still support from a distance, but you cannot be victimizing yourself by staying in a situation like that. You know what I mean?
That's true. Definitely. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. The only thing that I would add to that is also, if you come in contact with someone and you can recognize that this person does have some type of mental health issue, don't try and do too much.
Yeah.
Just be real simple, be basic, and just like Zane said, just ask questions. I mean, because sometimes, just like you said, they may not be able to explain themselves, but then you don't know if they can or cannot if you don't at least
Yeah.
ask the question.
Well, and of course, I do want to add, like, ask questions, but like ask like good conscious questions. Like, be careful about asking too personal questions. Always ask maybe like broad general questions. Even ask, is it okay if I ask you questions? Because you might go into like, hey, tell me about your mental health condition. It's like, whoa, that could be a bit much for someone to handle. So sometimes it's like, hey, can I ask you some questions? And you can ask like, how can I show up for you? Simple questions like that. And sometimes they are like, I don't know, but maybe just sitting here with me will help. Whatever it is, whatever they think. And again, if you're not comfortable doing something, then you have every right to say no too, right?
Exactly. That is so true. That is so true. One of the things that I want to also speak on, and I know that it's a very touchy situation, but you had someone in your life that was the most impactful person in your life and definitely one of your biggest fans. Um, how do you, because the reason why I'm asking you this is because this helps other people to be able to do what you do, or at least give them some idea on how to do things the way that you're doing it.
Yeah.
So how has this been impactful in the way that you lead your life today?
And you're speaking on my mom, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. I wouldn't say she was one of my biggest fans. She was definitely the biggest fan, for sure. And so, unfortunately, like I was very close to my mom, and she passed in January of 2021. Completely surprised too. It wasn't like there was an understanding, or like we were well aware of her passing, or that she was going to pass, And so I grapple with what I would have preferred. Do I prefer a surprise, or would I prefer being able to kind of officially say goodbye? Um, I mean, honestly, I prefer none, of course, but I think I prefer how it was, because I know my mom, and I feel like she would have been very, very, very upset having to leave us. I don't see it that way, but I know she would. She would be like, I'm leaving my children.
Mhm.
I know some people think that way, and it's like, you're not leaving. You have to move on. It's not you're leaving us, and you're not obviously making the decision to leave, because I know you wouldn't leave then. But yeah, it was a complete shock. I wouldn't say I was like fully in denial, but like it was hard to process, because I was like, my mom was kind of like a warrior, and she like went through a lot of surgeries and health stuff. So like I always expected her to come right out. Always. Even when my dad said she was having a hard time waking up, I was like, okay, well, whatever. She's gonna wake up though. So, but she unfortunately didn't. And she kind of had a fear of that, of not waking up from surgery, which is very sad that that fear happened. But I hope it was like unconscious, that it wasn't something she kind of realized, that it just kind of happened slowly, or not slow, well, slowly and painlessly, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's slowly. Usually people say fast, painless death, but a slow reflection, and then like maybe just moving on. I hope, but I'm never gonna know.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that was really hard. And I do enjoy talking about grief, because it's so complicated and so
It is.
sticky and messy and very, very hard. And for folks that, and it's also like very different when you lose someone that's close to you, of course, because like you could have gone through, like I've had a lot of people in my family pass, but like I was not anywhere nearly as close as I was to my mom, right?
Mhm.
And so like you could say you've gone through deaths, and so you get it. You're not going to get it until you lose someone that important to you. And when you do, you'll know exactly what it's like at that point. You know what I mean? And so it's an unfortunate thing. And like I remember someone giving an analogy that like when someone in your life close to you passes away, you're
Mhm.
like part of the same club now. You're in the same organization. You're like a lifetime member of this grief club, and you're never gonna get out ever. And no one can become a member until it actually happens to them, which to me is like a good analogy, because it's like, yes, we people who have experienced grief in that way, we get it. And there's like an unspoken bond there with someone that, someone told me that their dad passed away last year, and it's like, I get it. There's no words to say. I get it.
Mhm.
You know, and of course you say sorry and how are you doing and stuff, but it's like you get each other even from saying that, even especially when it comes from a parent or someone close to you, you do understand. And so that's why I also enjoy talking about it, so like people don't feel alone in their grief, that
Mhm.
there's also no specific way you need to grieve.
Exactly.
My only philosophy is, as long as you're not hurting people or yourself,
Mhm.
do it however you want. Like, if
Yeah.
don't engage in self-harm, don't abuse people, don't scream at them. And if you do, at least apologize or recognize that this is not usually who I am. I'm just having a really hard time. And if that's the case, then I think you need to do the right thing and just separate yourself. You
Mhm.
know, like for some, it's like some people have a hard time doing that, but it's like if you're really in such a vulnerable place that you're yelling at people, it's like maybe you need to just get out and just not speak to anyone for a couple of days, because you don't want to be treating people like that.
Exactly.
So, but I know that, like, you know, when people mourn in grief, it's like, oh, they're just being so emotional, over emotional. It's like, this is not for you to decide. This is not for you to judge
Exactly.
anyone on
Exactly.
how emotional they're being, also like how unemotional they're being. Because even when my mom first passed, I did cry throughout the day, but like I did not cry as much as many people in my family. And I think some people looked at that as like, oh, I'm not as upset. And I'm like, you have no right to like judge that, because you don't know what I'm feeling on the inside. And also, like, for me, it's like, I know this is like a little like probably insensitive, but like this is the 21st century. This is 2021 at the time. I think it's time we know that people grieve, or people like have a different emotional experiences. Like,
Yes,
I
definitely.
don't think, like, are we still this unaware that, like, you know, that it's hard to recognize that like you can be really upset on the inside. And for some people, like, they just don't express themselves that way. Even me, it's like I cry for music. Like, I'll cry to music because I love music, but like crying naturally is just difficult. I just don't do it. And it's, I don't think it's anything to do with being a man or whatever it is. It's just not who I
Right.
am, you know? And it's like,
Right.
and that's not a good thing or a bad thing. That's just kind of how it is. Like, I would like to cry more, because when you do it, it actually does feel kind of nice. But, you know, but I just don't as much. And that's okay. So I think, you know, like, understand that, like, you know, again, people express themselves differently, and also don't compare yourself to others, because I've had people compare their grief to mine.
Oh
Like,
my
this grief is
goodness.
worse because, oh,
Mhm.
like, for me, this is your parent, but for me, it was this person. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, you lost a parent, I lost a sibling, and it's like a lot worse for me. What sense does that make? I want to know, what sense does that
It
make? Like,
doesn't. Oh my goodness. It
I
doesn't
mean,
make
if you really want to go there, I think losing a parent is a lot harder. But I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to judge anyone else's experiences. And so when I see people do that, I'm just like, see, I'm just like, this is just a very like immature emotional response, because we should know better. We should know that no grief is worse than the others. And of course, some people do take it harder, and for some, the grief is harder. It's
Mhm.
just not for you to say to someone, because like, what does that even prove? Like, so your grief is harder. So what? Like, who cares? Like, mine is hard too. Maybe it's not at the level of yours, but I still lost someone very close to me too. And I think it can be like disrespectful to treat it that way, you
Yeah,
know.
I agree. I
And
think that the
I have,
levels
oh,
are
sorry.
based on I would say that the levels are based on that interpersonal relationship that you had with that other person. But at the end of the day, there's no comparison, because
No.
how do I compare my feelings to yours when I can't experience your feelings? I can only
Yeah,
experience mine.
right.
So that really doesn't make any sense at all to compare whose is worse rather whose is not rather than whose is not. That doesn't make any sense at all. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry, because it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. And when people do that, I'm just like, my goodness, I'm gonna take everything in me to not get mad, but it can be upsetting, because there's a lot going on there. For one, it's I have it so much worse than you, that your grief, you're not really experiencing that much. And it's also saying that your grief isn't as important as mine. That's what I'm hearing when someone says something like that. And I'm like, because there's really no reason to say that, you know. Like, whatever you're trying to get across, I don't know. And so when I hear that, I hear those motivations, and that's what you're trying to get at someone. um and sometimes people can say that because they're emotional, but
Okay.
or sometimes they can even be saying that because they are trying to hurt you. Whatever people's motivations are, you never know. But be careful with, you know, with people in that. And that's why it is hard for people to open up and to be vulnerable, because unfortunately, there are people in this world that will use that against you.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, and that's a hard thing. And the one thing that has helped me is like just talking to people, like, you know, being open about grief and then sharing it with other people,
Mhm.
understanding where people come from, and just being open to whatever entity is out there. Because I was never raised under a specific religion. Maybe my life would have more purpose if it did, probably not, but I would have a better relationship with God or something. So I'm not super religious, but I'm still very open because I know people that aren't religious in my family and they go, "Oh, there's no afterlife. That doesn't exist. That's not." And I'm like, "Well, I think that's great that you believe that, but like, do I need to hear that? Like, I don't need to hear your opinion on the afterlife because let's be honest, that makes me feel worse. Because like if there was confirmation that the afterlife wasn't real, that would be very upsetting. Because like for me, ever since my mom passed, I actually do have something to look forward to when I die now.
Mhm.
So it's like, you know, being able to see my mom again. And I even did I actually worked with a healing shoot, what was their position? Their title was like um they helped me with like a guided meditation.
Was
And
it
it
like
was
a
like with
shaman?
yeah, kind of they don't use that term, but like they do work like that, and they do like angel healing, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
That's it. That's more of what they do. They're like an angel healer. So they connect with angels
Mhm.
and somehow can kind of heal you through that, or like help you see your family. And so they asked if we could do a channeling meditation. And I said, maybe. It's kind of scary if you ask me. And so luckily I knew them because I have my own digital platform
Mhm.
on mental health and a lot of stuff because like, you know, mental attack was a lot. And so I interviewed her a long time ago and we've stayed in contact since. And it was really exciting to do that. And I hadn't talked to her in a while. And so we did it. And it was a very beautiful experience. And she painted this whole picture of how I was going through to see my mom. And like there was a point where I'm in like this the way she described it was like a bunch of diamonds and like a red velvet couch. And there's a point where I saw my mom come in and she was a lot younger. And I was like, this is weird. Not that it's weird in a bad way, but it's like this feels very real because if I really were to picture my mom, it would be how I remember her. And I never remembered her like that because she was a lot younger, probably my age or like in her 30s. And so
Oh wow.
so that's really interesting that you're young right now. And so had like this 5 minute conversation with her, and then she gave me a gift that she put in my hand, which was like this silver bell,
Uh-huh.
which is from like the Polar Express. Did you ever watch that movie?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So
Yes.
my mom gave me a bell like that when I was a kid, and to always have like the Christmas spirit and believe. And so
That's pretty
she
cool.
gave, yeah, she gave me the bell in the meditation. And so after the meditation was over, and me and the meditation person, we were talking about it. And she said that the bell is the proof that this really happened. And she said she's also picturing in her mind a bright pink feather. And I was like, because for some reason with her, she was seeing a lot of, like when I was going through the journey that she was painting me on, like she was seeing a lot of pink for some reason. And she said a bright pink feather is also going to be like your proof. And I was like, that is so odd. Like, where am I going to see a bright pink feather? But okay. And so I kid you not, I was playing a game. I was playing like the Hogwarts Legacy game. Any sign is a sign. I don't care what it is. Like some people go, oh, that's technology. That's not, no, it's a sign. It's all a sign. And so I was playing the game randomly, and I've been playing for weeks. And I literally found a room where there was a bunch of bells.
Mhm.
And that freaked me out. And I was like, there's a bunch of bells in this room. Okay, let me calm down. And so I just kept playing. And then eventually I ended up going to like a shop somewhere and like wanted like, I don't know, like just to buy some stuff in the game. And like there was a bright pink feather.
Wow.
And that was one of the things you could buy. I know it's a video game, I know, but it was
That's
very
still
weird
a
that
sign
like,
though.
and it was literally like an hour after the meditation. Like I did not see those things while I was playing for weeks. And then literally an hour after the meditation, that's the proof. And it happened right after. No,
Mhm.
proof. Like that's proof. And like of course I still have doubts, but like it's proof. And like to me, again, whatever people think, it's what they think. But I'm looking forward to the day I get to move on because I know that there's gonna be people waiting for me there, and it's gonna be
Yes.
very nice reunion. And then I've read some things that, you know, even when you pass on, that you remember everyone. that when you have your family reunion, it's like, wow, you are my cousin from 80 years ago, or you're my grandpa from 200 years ago, whatever it is. Like you have like a revelation, like you remember everyone, and it's like a very beautiful reunion. But again, we'll never know until we reach that point, and we'll never be able to tell anyone. But I am looking forward to it. And so ever since my mom died, I feel like I've gotten appreciation for life more, and that again, I have something to kind of look forward to, and I'm not really scared of death anymore, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it is. It does feel good. When my grandmother passed away, it's kind of interesting that you said when someone close to you passed away, it's a whole different feeling because it really is.
Yeah.
My grandmother raised me since I was 5 years old. So I've been with my grandmother from my young adulthood to, I mean, from my young adulthood to the age of 5. And
Hmm.
it was a wonderful experience to have someone like that in my life. And I tell you, it was really, really horrible, the feeling, because I didn't cry at my grandmother's funeral,
Hmm.
but afterwards, which was literally probably a few months afterwards, I actually did, because it seemed like it just really set in
Yeah.
around that time frame. And it didn't last, but I was
Hmm.
still very, very hurt internally,
Hmm.
knowing that I was not going to see her, in this life
Yeah.
anymore, but I probably wouldn't see her until it's time for me to actually cross over. So it was crazy because that night after my grandmother's funeral, I started smelling her perfume.
Mm.
And it was like I felt the presence, and it was like she was literally
Oh,
standing right here next to me.
yeah.
And
Wow.
I can never forget that day of that actually happening. It was like that's the most memorable thing that has happened to me since she passed away. So I was like, oh my goodness. And then shortly after my grandmother passed away, then my son was born. my third my third son was actually
Mhm.
born shortly after that. And I was like, wow, this is so crazy. And when my daughter was born, my daughter has the same exact hands as my grandmother.
Oh, really?
The nails, the way the
Mhm.
nails are shaped, the way my grandmother used to keep her nails, the whole nine. Because my grandmother didn't like wear a lot of fingernail polish, but when she did wear fingernail polish, because her favorite color was red, she
Mhm.
would put on some red fingernail polish, but it seemed like she didn't keep it on long. She mostly wore them natural, and my daughter mostly wears hers natural. And there, and it's so crazy because every time I look at my daughter's hands, I think about my
Yeah.
grandmother.
Mhm. Wow. Well, that's very sweet. And that's interesting. I actually interviewed someone that had that experience, but for them, theirs kind of went into like a very different route. Like, but when was it their grandma or their mom? I can't remember, but or aunts. Someone in their family passed, and they started smelling their perfume, which was interesting. For them, they became like a medium. So like they were able to actually like talk to their grandma or like see them. Not all of us can have that gift, or if some people consider that a gift, but but it's interesting like that. It could be very comforting because you know that
Yes.
whatever that, and like you could think it's like, oh, is that just like my memory? But it's like, I don't think so, because like you probably would have thought of it many times then. Why that specific moment? Why only that moment? And like even when my mom passed, I knew she did actually. No one told me. So when my dad came out and told me, I knew, mostly because of his demeanor. He's like, "Oh, can we come talk outside?" I'm like, "About what? Like you've never done that before." I know. But also I remember having like very intense chills, as if you have the flu, like where you're shivering basically. I woke up and it was like 6 in the morning. I was shivering, and I don't shiver unless I'm sick. And so I was like, mm, I think I know what that is. And so I had a feeling. Um, that's why I think when it first, even though I was still in denial, because of course, but I still kind of knew because it felt like, you know, when they pass through you in a way. There's someone that does
Yes.
really cool
Yes.
work. There's someone that does really cool work called like the shared death experience. I don't know much about it, so I can't speak too much on it, but it's kind of like sometimes when they die, you could feel them move on, or you can
Yeah.
feel that experience, and you somewhat kind of experience death with them, kind of. I don't know, but it's very interesting work, and sometimes
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense, and I didn't experience something really intense that way, but still, I
Mhm.
remember I also had a really intense dream of my mom, and it felt so real. And I remember waking up from it the most relaxed I've ever been. And I was
Mhm.
like, it was like we both had this like interdimensional conversation there. Like
Mhm.
through dreams, we both had a dream that we both needed closure on. And it happened. I wouldn't say it's the ultimate closure because you'll never get closure.
Yeah.
Not like you'll get closure, but not like ultimate closure where it's like, hey, you're good now. It's like that's not how it works. But and I think also with grief, it's like for some folks, it's like it's fine if you're numb. Like if you're numb for 3 weeks and you don't cry, it's like just let yourself process it.
Mhm.
Don't say I gotta cry, I gotta be upset. No, you don't at all.
You
And
know, you
it's not a sign you didn't care for them. And it's not a sign you didn't care for them. Because some people look at that and be like, how come I'm not crying like someone else? Did I not care for them? It's like, no, it's not that at all. That's just how your body works, and this is how your brain is processing it. And so let it come when it comes and appreciate it when it comes, because it can be frustrating to be like, why am I not crying? And then when it hits you, it's like, okay, that was actually a nice release that I get to have. um what's interesting is like the opposite of you, or not actually, no, kind of the same, but when we did my mom's funeral, it was COVID time, of course, and so we had to wait like almost a whole year. So
Mhm.
she passed in January, we did her celebration in April of 2022. So it was a long time. So when her celebration, I was actually just happy it was happening because it took a long time for us to do it.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, my dad wasn't ready to do it. I was like, can we do it? But
Yes.
it took a lot of pushing, but we eventually did it. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. To me, it was perfect. I really loved it. And I didn't cry at all. I gave my mom's eulogy, and there were some people that said, I can never do that. And I'm like, oh, maybe. I mean, your circumstance is very different because when their mom passed, they did the funeral like weeks later.
Right.
So I have had like almost 9 months. Actually, no, it was a whole year, a year and a half, year and 4 months to process it. So at
Mhm.
that point, I wasn't going to be super sad about it because I had already kind of processed it as much as I could. And honestly, seeing everyone, it just made me happy. And so
Mhm.
I actually had like a really good day because, and also we set the intention of this is not a funeral. This is a celebration to celebrate life.
Yes.
That's also why, like, one day I just went out of the country for once to Portugal. And I want to travel more now. And I would love, especially since I'm Mexican, I'd be like, I want to go and do a real authentic altar of Day of the Dead. And like, just what they do is like the flowers, and they put the foods out that your family loved. And it's like everyone shares in that way. And it's like, I need to experience that. I've gone to like Day of the Dead here in America, like in California. It's like it's
Not the
clearly not the same thing at all.
same.
So I also love how different cultures view death because like they'll see it as a celebration, or
Mhm.
like just again putting their favorite food out. It's like you just put out what they love, and I'm like, that's just so cool. It's like it's not a way to just honor and celebrate their life. It's like celebrate the little things they enjoyed, like Starbucks or
Mhm.
corn on the cob, whatever it is that they really loved, right? And
Yep.
it's like it may not feel major, it's like that's not a big deal. It's the food they liked. Well, all those little things do matter though.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's definitely a big thing, no matter what
Yeah.
says or does. It's a big thing. It makes a
Mhm.
difference in how we view our ancestors, because now this person has just become one of our ancestors because they're no longer here for us to acknowledge them. So now we have to acknowledge them from a past experience or
Mhm.
past experiences that we've had with them. So it's, to me, it's a blessing when you look at it. It's a full-fledged
Yeah.
blessing, and just the acknowledgement of them, just remembering all the things that they used to do, passing those things down to generations after you. It's a blessing. It's a true
Yeah.
blessing to me. So
Yeah.
I was also looking at something else, and I want to be able to touch bases on these two things before our time passes. You had an opportunity to meet with President Biden. You also had the opportunity
Yes.
to be a founder of Positive Vibes magazine. I find that awesome and amazing. How did you come up with the concept for the magazine?
I'll spill on the magazine first because I think the magazine propelled me to get to the White House, I will say. Not yeah, I'll explain. And so I started the magazine in May of 2020. So beginning of pandemic, which was the inspiration for it, because at the time I saw that there was so much focus on the deaths and the health and the virus, which is fine, of course, because it's very, very, very important. But there just wasn't a lot of focus on mental health, which again wasn't surprising. But I was like, this is such a prime opportunity. It really is, because it's not the deaths that's only impacting people. It's like seeing the deaths, losing people, being isolated, losing, grieving on things you've lost, not just your family, but like, I can't go to school. I can't see my friends. I can't even see my family. Some people were in different countries and they couldn't see their family for years. It's like, that's so much. And so like, why aren't we talking about the mental toll it's having on people? Conversations were happening, but like not from I don't think the media was doing as much as they could, which again doesn't surprise me because they still don't really talk about mental health as much. So at the time I was actually taking a university class on copywriting, and our final project was to create our final project was to create a publication. And so I decided to create one on positive mental health, especially in light of the pandemic. I did the project, I did well, but I remember having the idea that I messaged my friend that looked it over. I was like, why don't we actually pursue something like this? Like, why not? Like, tons of people have blogs, tons of people have their own digital publications. Like, why can't we do something like this?
Exactly.
And she thought it was a good idea. So I was like, okay, we'll try. I've never done this before. And so we just started with social media because I knew social media. I was like, let's do postings. We did stuff about spirituality and like just fun stuff like that, and things that like, to make people find some sense of purpose or meaning, and that it's okay if you're upset. It's okay if you're like having a really terrible day. It really is. Like, it's not okay that you're having a terrible day, but it's okay if you feel terrible, because there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
We did different sharings like that, and then eventually we did like some blog posts about creative writing and seeing a therapist. Eventually we had someone reach out to us and they're like, do you ever interview folks? And we're like, we don't, but like, why not? And so like my friend interviewed him, we released a story. Since then that changed the message, or not the message, the trajectory, because we weren't going to interview people. It just wasn't part of our idea. And so since then, that's mostly what we do now, is we just interview people that have these powerful stories full of powerful lessons, living their everyday life, trying to make a difference, people that really deserve the spotlight. And so yeah, and that's what it became. And so we've been able to interview over 90 people ever since I got my first job, because I work for National Geographic. So ever since, and I moved, so we aren't like cranking out content as much as we used to, but as long as we slowly get out stories, I think that's fine. To me, that's great. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been, and it's been over 3 years since, doesn't sound like it, but it's been a while. And I think that even though I don't contribute as much time as I used to the magazine, it's still there. And I still love working with the writers that I have. And it's changed my life in so many ways. And it's not that, because I think some people look at it and be like, oh, this changed my life because it was so successful, it was so impactful. No, like it's not that at all. Like it could, I wish there were more views. I wish there were more clicks and stuff, but I'm very happy with where it is. And some people might look at it and be like, well, that's actually not as much traction as we thought it would be. It's like, well, I don't care. Like I'm not making money off of it. I don't care if, I know some people it's their livelihood, but it's not my livelihood. Like I don't make money from it. So if I were making money, then yes, I'd be very stressed about getting as much clicks as possible. But since it's not, I don't need to worry about that. And I just care about sharing those authentic stories, and that's it.
Right.
And so it's changed my life because I've been able to just interview people with such amazing stories. And I've been able to look at my own life. And even when my mom passed, hearing how they felt about grief and the life and death and spirituality, I was like, that is giving me some purpose here.
Yes.
So it's expanded my network. It's given me speaking opportunities. And again, with the White House, the reason why I think I was picked is because, well, the answers I gave, but also because of the magazine. Again, not because it's uber successful, it's because I'm able to share here that I started something all about mental health storytelling, and I'm still continuing it, and I can speak on how it's changed my life and how from it I became such a stronger advocate. And so sometimes even just starting something small can change your life, and you never know where it's going to lead you at all. And so, yep, I got to go to the White House. I was incredibly excited when I was chosen for it. And then what's funny is like we didn't think we were going to meet President Biden because President Biden wasn't on the itinerary, but he just kind of showed up at the end of the event and met all of us. And I don't know if you saw, but there's a selfie of him and all of us. So
Yeah, I did see that.
very incredible opportunity, very incredible opportunity just to like advocate for youth mental health at a national stage has been very exciting. And since then I've spoken on a lot of podcasts, speaking roles. I serve on NAMI's Next Gen. I've been able to speak on TV on this campaign that was aired on several stations. And that was my goal, because even though the forum, the White House, that was recorded, I broadcasted, I wasn't like an official speaker. So I was like, okay, I've been on the news. Now it's my goal to speak on the news. And luckily, like in January or February, I got to speak on the news about mental health. And that was another incredible experience. And so I'm just very grateful for all the experiences I have. And that's why if anyone ever has any questions on how to be an advocate or how to get media opportunity, I'm always like, just talk to me and I'll see what I can do. Or I'll help you develop a pitch, because I think the biggest problem people have is they have these beautiful stories, but they don't pitch themselves. They don't tell news organizations about their story. And so like, unfortunately, a lot of people's stories are not going to be sought out by media a lot. So at that point, it's like, you got to make the case for yourself. It may not, and that's why like sometimes you can't go for the big news channels because they go for really newsworthy stuff.
Yeah.
Again, putting yourself out there, you don't know what's going to happen. You could be featured on Entrepreneur, or you could be featured on a podcast, whatever it is, and every little bit counts. Because I think some people might look at the numbers and be like, oh, I'm being featured on a platform that has not as many followers as I would want. That doesn't matter. Who cares? As long you're still putting your story out there. And I think also people question like, oh, I was featured on this this publication that has 60,000 followers. How come I'm not getting tons of followers from that? That's not how media works. You're not going to get followers from because the reason why they have followers, they have followers because their followers like their content. Exactly. So you need to make sure that your content is desirable. It's not just this story. That's not how it works. But let's be real, like from the media I've done, I've gone like maybe a good 400 followers in the scope of the year, which is not a lot, which I don't care, because I don't really care about building the numbers on my platforms that way. But it's like, it still helps though. You'll get some followers though, for sure, but you don't expect thousands, because that's not how media works at all. But so that's my suggestion of like, how to elevate your story. It's like, you just got to make the case for yourself, because your story is worth it, but you just got to like make someone else see it. Because unfortunately, your story alone, might not be enough for some platform, or they just may not know. Maybe they'd be very interested, but you just got to put yourself out there.
Yes, indeed. That is so true. So what was it like meeting Selena Gomez?
Yeah, because Selena Gomez was the keynote, and I do appreciate that they selected her to do that, because she's actually like very outspoken about it. She has a lived experience. Her company donates proceedings to it. So she's really in the space, because like I'll question when I'll see influencers get brand deals. I'm like, you don't really represent the values of this brand, to be honest with you. Not really. Like and maybe you do personally, but your content, it's not really aligned with the brand that much.
Right.
So I like when they actually select someone that, is really aligned with what they're trying to do there. It was cool. Like, I'll be honest, I didn't really get to like be with her that much. Like, I got to be here for like, I was near her on the stage and she was one of the speakers, but I got to take a picture with her with Jill Biden and Dr. Murthy. So it was the four of us in like a straight line. But no, I didn't really get to. The only thing I said was, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." That's it. I didn't say anything else. I was also kind of nervous, of course, and like being at the White House, it was like very nervous, and
I was gonna ask that.
Very nervous. But it was nice meeting her. I mean, she seemed very kind and appreciative and gracious for the opportunity. And I think also you never know and just what I think, I'm not sure, but it seemed like she was nervous too. because like you never think that's possible. Like, like being an actress or a singer, like yeah, you might get to go to great things like a red carpet event or these networking events.
Mhm.
You get to speak on mental health in front of the president. Like, no, I don't know if a lot of actors or actresses can say they've done that. So it's like you don't ever expect that. And her mom was in the audience, which was very sweet.
Mhm.
And so she seemed like a very real, down to earth person. And I also like that, like, when she goes on social media and people start commenting on her body, she's like, okay, I'm done with social media. It's like, good for you. Like, you don't
Yeah.
need to, there's no reason for you to be on it. Just live your life. I do, again, I don't know her. I did get to go one of her events though, because she was hosting, like, her company was hosting an event. She wasn't there. But it was
Mhm.
a pretty like small event about like queer stuff, which was pretty cool. And so I was excited to go to that. And again, it wasn't just going to the White House. It was like all the partners that were involved, all these organizations. I still have ties to them, if it's Pinterest or Rare Beauty or Jed Foundation, whatever it is. And yeah, so it was, again, very nice meeting her, and she seemed very nice, and yeah, very, very grateful.
That's pretty cool. I like that. That is cool. I mean, you got a chance to do some wonderful things, and I admire that. I'm happy, definitely, not just for
Mm.
you, but for the experiences that you got a chance to actually have, and that is wonderful. There's a lot of people out here who would definitely love to be able to walk in your shoes for certain things, no doubt about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing because that means that you're definitely doing things that other people want to do as well. And I like that. I mean, I would have loved to get a chance to meet Joe Biden and Selena Gomez and um, Dr. Murthy, and you know what I'm saying. I would have liked to meet some of those
Yeah.
people. I haven't got that opportunity yet, but I'm not gonna say that it'll never happen. But
No, definitely. No, good chance. Put the vibes out there. And that's why for me, it's like, I don't try not to, because it's very easy. Like, every opportunity that comes my way, like sometimes we're like, oh, it's just, that was cool. But I wish it was better or whatever.
Mhm.
But for things like the White House and how incredible it was, it's like I do have gratitude for all of it. Mostly because, just like you said, I know that there's many people that would love to do that. So
Mhm.
I do not take any of this stuff for granted, that like, oh, it's no big deal. I met the president. I mean, some people might look at me because sometimes I'd be like, yeah, I did meet President Biden one time. And so I know some people go, how do you just like throw that in? I'm like, okay, sorry. Like, I feel like, because I've mentioned so many times to people, that I just tell people now, and I never make it a big deal like, oh, I've met the president. It's more like, oh no, I've met Biden before and it was great. I think some people go like, how do you just nonchalantly say it? I'm like, well, again, I've told so many people now, it's just kind of like I'm used to it. So sorry about that. But I never come with the attitude of like, oh, like I'm too good for this, or like I've done this. Like, I don't know. Like, I come from like a certain background, certain lifestyle, certain socioeconomic class. It's like the idea that, like, coming from like lower middle class suburbs, California, to DC and meeting the presidents, like that to me is like, I know the American dream is kind of sometimes a flawed notion. It's not necessarily true, but like that to me is what that is. And it's not something that everyone can experience, unfortunately. But for ones that do, like, have gratitude, because I was so, even like during the event, I remember trying to ground myself, like, this is gonna be over in like 5 minutes. I guarantee it. Like, it's gonna feel like it's gonna end in 5 minutes, because that's how things go. Like, when you're having a
Yeah,
really good time,
yeah. It seemed like
it
it
goes
time
by way too,
flies.
yeah, time flies. So it's like, I think in those moments where you're feeling so good, come back to yourself and like ground yourself or meditate or something, because it's going to end soon, and you want to soak up every single feeling. Like, it's, so like, again, like, have a lot of gratitude, appreciate that moment, because again, it's going to go, and I don't know if you'll ever have another chance. I mean, you won't. You might have a chance similar. Maybe I can go to the White House for this, but it's never going to be for what this purpose was. it's
Yeah.
it's always this unique moment. And so yeah, that's what I would say.
That's pretty cool, man. That is pretty cool. So before we get up out of here, what would be a very inspirational and positive message that you would like for people to know?
Mhm. I think, like, a lot of people, I think it's easy to look at people and just assume that, no, how do I say it? It's like more like, like I think sometimes people will look at me and be like, I'm super lucky. I'm super lucky that I got to go to the White House, that maybe not a lot of folks get that opportunity. And it's like, I disagree. I don't think that I've been lucky. I think I've had some sort of luck in my life, but I've also put in the work for it. And I understand other people put in the work and they may not see results like that, but they get other results that sometimes I want to see. Like they'll speak at this amazing conference as a keynote. I'm like, well, you got sure I got to go to the White House, but you got that opportunity too. It's like just because something looks bigger, looks like it has more volume, it's like it doesn't. Like, sometimes what you're doing, people want to see. So it's like sometimes I think some people look at what they're doing like, oh, I don't really impact people much. I'm like, you do. Trust me. It just doesn't feel like it. Um, and I have that's something I think about too. It's like, am I really making a difference? It's like it doesn't matter if you are or not. Just keep staying true to your vision, and you will be impacting people. It doesn't matter. That's just how I feel about that. And so I guess that's my inspirational message. And I think that like you don't have to go 0 to 100 either. Like, growth is growth no matter what. I've been on like a fitness journey, and like my friend is starting to lose weight too, and she's like, I've only lost like 3 pounds in 3 weeks. I'm like, and I think that's worth celebrating, right? I mean, it may not be your goal, but
Right.
it's better than gaining 3 pounds, right? And
Yeah.
so again, my thing is like progress is progress, and whatever progress you have, you should celebrate it, but
Yeah.
don't give up. Obviously, like I know some people go, oh, I've lost 5 pounds, I'm going to celebrate, I'm going to have junk food, and then you pop off. Like, don't do that. Find a way to celebrate, but you don't have to like sacrifice your goals though. Cause it's like, I know a lot of people that are trying to lose weight, and they'll go like, I deserve this junk food. And I'm like, that's sure. Like if you want, and like, that's what you want. But in the long run, are you going to be happy with what you're doing right now? I don't know. That's
Yeah.
not for me to that's not for me to decide. That's why it's just for me to question, like,
Hmm.
celebrate everything you do, like celebrate your goals, celebrate your accomplishments, but don't give up on them, because it can be really easy to just forget about them, or it can also be easy to just give up.
Hmm.
And you know what, this is my thing too, like I feel like we shame people that give up. You know what, if you give up, I think that's fine. But again, if you keep complaining about your circumstances, that's kind of different. It's like,
Definitely.
like if you give up, at least acknowledge that. Don't complain anymore about some of the things that are in your life, because you kind of gave up. But to me, it's like, if you want to give up, give up. Like that's, to me, I'm not going to shame anyone. Like it's a great thing. Like if you're like, oh, I've lost 20 pounds, like I'm tired. Like, I really don't want to keep going, or I'm going to just not be as extreme. It's like, hey, if that's what you want to do, like I'll support it. Again, as long as it doesn't hurt you or the people around you, that's all that matters to me.
Yes, yes, I totally agree with the not hurting other people or yourself. I totally agree with that.
Mhm.
One of the things I'll say to add to what you're saying
Mhm.
is when I was younger, there was one of my friends, he's a Japanese guy, and we were sitting around talking about creating a video game. And his name is Jack. Jack actually wanted to give up on the video game because he was like, man, we're never going to have time to do it and things of that nature. Well,
Mhm.
ironically, his dad told him that he needed to come back home, go back to Japan, because I'm originally from Chicago and that's where we all were.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
his dad said, just because Jack is gone doesn't mean that you guys can't finish your project or do your project. And he said to me, he said, one thing that my grandfather told me, and I'm going to share this with you, is that the longest journey is shortened by taking the first step. And I
Mhm.
was kind of like baffled by it, but then I had to sit and contemplate on that, like, okay, I get where that's going and what you meant by that. If you don't take the first step, then how do you know what's
Yeah.
next? You have to take that first step. And to piggyback off of what you're saying, if you know that you have a weight loss goal, at least do it long enough to reach your goal. And if you decide to give up after that goal has
Yeah.
been reached, guess what? You still have a success story because you reached your goal,
Yeah.
at least.
No, I like that. And I also like that the first step Again, doesn't have to be a giant leap.
It
It
doesn't.
could be like, hey, the first step is let's research, well, with the video game, let's research if that video game exists. Or maybe our first step is reaching out to video game designers. Is this possible? Like, I don't know, something so simple so you can get started. Because I
Mm,
feel like, especially with weight loss, I feel like people like, oh, like I'm tired, I'm gonna go from like this to eating barely anything to working out every single day. That's not gonna work. That's
no.
not gonna work at all. And I'm not saying, and it's not that you can't do it, but like just anyone. If anyone's going to go from sedentary to complete active in a week, you are going to burn yourself out. There's no way. And you don't want to do that to your body because again, if you work out too hard, you might stress it out and you might gain weight that way. And you also just might, not a lot of weight, but you can. And also you're just putting a lot of pain and pressure and stress on your body. And if you're trying to get active, that's kind of counterintuitive, right? If you're trying to live a more active, healthy lifestyle, you got to do with some balance because that radicalness is not going to work. And it's probably just going to put your body at jeopardy. And that's kind of the opposite of what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Definitely. You gotta have balance. Gotta have balance. The good, the bad, positives and negatives, you gotta have balance.
yep, absolutely.
But definitely want to thank you again. And please, by all means, let everybody know where we can reach you.
I make myself as accessible as possible. So you have my name, just type in my name, literally type in my name. You'll find my Instagram, you'll find my Facebook, my LinkedIn. And yeah, feel free to message me on whatever you want to talk about. If it's careers, weight loss, mental health, whatever. I'm open to talk about anything.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, Mr. Zane Landin. Oh my goodness. This has definitely been a great journey, man. This is
Yeah, thank you.
something new to the platform. And I definitely thank you because this was one of the things that I've always wanted was to actually be able to speak with someone who knows or understands the lifestyle of being in the queer environment, LGBTQ, whatever all those letters are. I'm sorry, no disrespect, but
No, that's right though.
those numbers. It's hard to remember all those letters,
Yeah.
but this is a beautiful thing because it gives me the opportunity to interact with someone, and it also shows my audience and your audience that it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. We can still communicate. We can have conversations that are not just beneficial to one, but also beneficial to me. And this is the goal. This is the total goal. I want us to be able to continue this type of life cycle. Hopefully, this will draw more people into being able to tell their story and say, hey, look, this is an opportunity for us all to work together and make
Yeah.
something out of it. Most definitely. Thank you so much, Zane. It is definitely a blessing, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for having me on and the work you're doing too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My goal is to reach one person per
Yeah.
month. If I can reach one person with my message, my thing is about relationships, building relationships. You're definitely on the youth mental health, and I feel like these type of things can have some type of collaboration that'll help build communities and build the lifestyles of other people. So let's
Yeah.
make it happen, bro. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you. And you have a wonderful day, Zane. Everybody, please make sure you check Zane out on his social media platforms. Please feel free to DM Zane.
Yep.
Peace and blessings, my friend. And you have a wonderful, wonderful day, man. Thank you. Again, thank you.